Next, welcome first-time DynamicsCon speakers, Liese Heyns and Lethabo Mohlatole. They will present how to bottle growth through automated performance testing in a high-volume, complex environment. Please stick around after Liese and Lethabo's session for a live Q&A.
Thank you for the opportunity to be presenting on this DynamicsCon platform. Introducing our topic, how to bottle growth through automated performance testing in a high-volume complex. Introducing our speakers, we have Liese Heyns, a solution specialist under Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management, as well as myself, Lethabo, an Enterprise Applications Consultant in Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management as well, both from Entity Data. Now, I would like to just break into our discussion today quickly by just sharing a bit of a story. And for a second, I would like you to just imagine for a second your e-commerce company that is currently gearing up for your biggest sale of the year, which is the upcoming Black Friday. There have been months of meticulous planning, strategic marketing, and growing that has just been so much growing anticipation that has led to this very moment. Your team is just confident. They've rigorously tested the website under normal conditions, and just everything just seems flawless. Everything is perfect. But as the clock strikes midnight, millions of eager customers are flooding the site, and within minutes, the website crashes. Your customers are frustrated, social media is ablaze with complaints, and competitors are just quick to capitalize on the chaos. The results: your e-commerce company loses millions in potential sales, and more importantly, the trust of your customers. The lesson: putting performance testing under real-world conditions is crucial, just like with Dynamics 365. Ensuring your system can handle peak loads can mean the difference between a successful launch and a disastrous one. Now, to get into just a bit of understanding of what we are talking about today, Microsoft defines performance testing for Dynamics 365 as just a way to measure how well your solution works under different conditions. This also just helps to ensure that your solution meets the requirements of your users, your business stakeholders, as well as your project team. It is also important to just know the fact that performance testing will vary by budget as well as needs. Now, with this, bit of understanding in your head, I would want to just, give us a view of who our client was. Simply because of when we speak about different conditions and requirements that performance testing clients may be based on, we just want to share, where our world is coming from and who our client is, just for you to get that context straight. Every second, over 10,000 soft drinks are sold globally by one of the largest bottlers in the world. And I think that's just an incredible amount of soda. Imagine the challenge of manufacturing, distribution, and as well as selling your product at this pace. You'll definitely want to ensure the software that runs your business can keep up, right? Over the past 3 years, I have been part of one of the largest Microsoft Dynamics 365 implementations in the Southern Hemisphere. And over the past year, my focus has been on performance testing. So why did this client consider performance testing a necessary investment? A powerhouse in consumer packaging, in consumer packaged goods, and one of the largest soft drinks producers in Africa, with operations spanning 15 markets in the continent. The software that underpinned their business was just critically important. In 2020, this long-standing SAP client decided to replace their ERP solution with Microsoft Dynamics 365, finance and operations, as well as the customer engagement, just for the agility the solution would provide. Their daily revenue is looking at 8 million euros, spreading across nearly 140,000 sales orders that needs to be synchronized in between customer engagement as well as finance and operations. This was a phased implementation, but as they approached the go live of their South African business, which counts to the largest part of their revenue, this company wanted certainty that Dynamics 365 will provide the same, if not better performance than their previous solution. 50% of these sales order lines are captured during peak hour of the day. And if the system could not handle the transaction volumes, can you just imagine the potential financial losses? The software landscape of this company, company size, it's just been extremely complex. Their CE, which is customer engagement, as well as the finance and operation solutions are integrated with over 20, 30 party applications, as well as 11 independent software vendors. Any efficiencies that can come through, this could introduce a huge amount of problems where data needs to flow from the customer engagement side to the finance and operation side. So the business really wanted to identify any potential bottlenecks in the software so that the solution that is going to be implemented before this high trading periods, either through a system or a process intervention. They also importantly wanted to ensure that the user experience was better than, with the previous solution, because this business understand that to protect their business, they definitely need happy and efficient user bases. And ultimately, this client just needed to protect their business. They simply could not afford any technical glitches or technology issues, simply because this will impact their ability to trade. Now, we also speak about integrations. To strengthen their business against any potential revenue losses, this client just had to invest in performance testing and work by side with Microsoft and their partners to design the solution that can work for them. Another important detail, I think, in this moment is to mention that when we speak about automated performance testing, we refer to the automation practice that mimic real-world conditions, as everyday jobs requires people and users to complete different tasks. Now, we can't have actual people completing tasks during the testing period. As humans, we tend to get distracted, someone in the kitchen making a cup of coffee, or maybe even checking emails. But with having virtual users who will mimic your actual employees' jobs and tasks with just 100% concentrations, this just allows you for automated testing in a fixed time period to just ensure maximum efficiency. Now, with this context set, I can hand over to Liese Marié to just kind of explore and introduce when can you implement performance testing.
Thank you so much, Lethabo, and thank you for setting the scene for us. So Microsoft actually proposes a number of testing iterations as part of your Dynamics 365 implementation. And there are many opportunities before and even after go live where performance testing can really add value to your project. Introducing performance testing as early as unit testing is an opportunity for your developers to validate the performance of custom code and integrations that are being developed at the specific volumes that is going to be generated for a specific process. It allows you to confirm that the code is running efficiently, and it also caters for the real-world requirements that is going to be needed once the solution is taken into the live environment. There's also a lot of value during regression testing before and after go live, because some issues are only picked up when testing at scale, and making performance testing part of your planning when you are doing regression testing allows you to detect problems early before they occur in your production environment where the impact could truly be severe. You should also consider a testing iteration that is dedicated to performance before you prepare for deployment, to create a clear view of the performance that can be expected from the solution once you go live. And it provides Microsoft with analytics as they prepare your production environment. It also plays a role as your business continues to expand, and we are going to get into some of those scenarios on the next slide. So the value of performance testing really lies in the ability to identify bottlenecks in the way that you are utilizing the system. And this won't be the same for every company in every industry. During our almost 2 years of performance testing, we have identified specific use cases where it makes sense. We've grouped them into 3 categories. The first is where you want to understand the performance of your system today, or perhaps you are experiencing performance-related issues with the system, and you want to identify whether this is process-related, transaction volumes, or even some batch jobs that are running within the system. The second scenario is where you want to see the impact of business expansion on the system, and it could be due to year-on-year growth, a particular event that you're gearing up for, like our example of Black Friday. It could be the acquisition of new companies, or even as part of a rollout when new legal entities are being onboarded to your D365 solution. The last scenario might be the most technical one of all, and that is where you want to analyze your existing or your future IT landscape. It can include validating that your environment is sized correctly, the impact that ISVs or integrations and the integration type is having, as well as other architecture considerations like, for example, Delta Lake. We'll discuss each one of these types or these reasons for performance testing in a little bit more detail now. So when deciding to test your system efficiency, it can be to baseline the current capability of your solution, for example, right before a go live or before any planned changes that you want to introduce in your environment. Or it could be because you're experiencing sluggishness on certain processes or during certain periods of the day, and you want to get some quantitative data that will enable you to identify these bottlenecks and define a roadmap for implementing solutions based on your company's priorities. The first step is to gather information on the system performance, and this can be done through time studies, through data analysis, or even through conversations with your end users and observing how they use the system. It can also be based on a list of key performance indicators that you might already have that you were using with your previous ERP system. The important thing here is really to pinpoint a list of key processes and batch jobs that you want performance data on. And while it makes sense to use your legacy system as a gauge, I would definitely caution against making that the only measurement that you're using. So while using your legacy system as a gauge for performance is helpful, we would caution against making that your only measurement. Of course, you want your user experience to remain constant or even improve, but you should consider the underlying architecture of the two systems. For example, your old system might be using background processing where the new ERP is giving you real-time updates. And where you need immediate answers on whether a process completed successfully, for example, when you're confirming a shipment and you are literally putting your goods on a truck that is being driven to your clients, you want to make sure that there isn't any validations that would have prevented you from doing that, right? And so in that case, you might want to compromise on the solution speed because you've got that immediate answers. If there are any questions at this point, please pop them in the chat for us. We are definitely going to be responding during the Q&A phase of our presentation. So the next thing when you are preparing for performance testing that you need to do is to define the scope of your testing. The more processes you include, the more complex your testing scenarios will be, and the more effort it will take to prepare, and the more things can go wrong. So once you have the list of processes, you really need to be honest with yourself about what your MVP or your must-haves are, and rather keep a list of like-to-haves that can form part of a larger roadmap. The next step is to source your test data. The best solution is using existing transactional data from your current or even your legacy system. You need to analyze that data to identify peak periods within the year, and depending on the type of test that you want to do, you need to identify the peak trading periods within a specific day. We were lucky that our clients had an incredibly capable BI department who was able to assist us in identifying the peak trading periods within a year and even the busiest times of the day for the system. In our example, we identified the 22nd of September as the most active day, with the 12th and the 19th hours being our peak periods for sales transactions and delivery and invoicing respectively. We used this actual transactional data from the system to build out our test data sets. And looking at the historical data also helped us to determine how many people in the system were generating these transactions and what the concurrencies of these activities were. Where the data wasn't available, we relied on the business process leads to help us fill in some of those gaps. And where there was no data available, we made some assumptions and we had the opportunity to validate those during our design phase. So then what you would want to do is define some end-to-end scenarios. This will give you a view of how data flows within and even between processes. You also need to make a choice here whether you want to run a performance test as an uninterrupted end-to-end scenario or if you want to take a pre-baked cake approach. And this is where you stage data at different points in the process so that these steps can all be executed in parallel. Using this parallel approach reduces the risk of an issue in one process affecting your ability to test the next and helps you ensure that you're processing each of these processes at the right transaction volumes. Early on in our project, we realized that this parallel approach is going to work for us. And even though it's a little bit more work to set up, overall, what we found is it gives us a better opportunity to hit our target volumes, and it enabled us to do more comparable reporting from one run to the next. When you are recording your processes in a test automation tool, and in our case, we made use of Executive Automats, but there are several amazing tools available on the market today. We also work to make our test cases smart. So what do I mean by that? A script can only handle the steps in the system that was defined in the tool. And what happened a lot in the beginning of our testing is that every data record does not interact with the system in the exact same way. We needed to make adjustments to our script with conditional steps or even with advanced decision-making capability that would allow it to handle many different variations of a process without errors. And this is also a reason why continuous improvement needs to be part of your performance test planning. So I'm just going to remind you that we are really excited to your questions because we're going to go into a next part of the presentation now. Maybe just one more thing is the considerations around integrations. And here you just want to look at whether or not integrations are going to be part of your performance testing. Different integrations will push data to Dynamics in different ways, and your testing needs to account for this. If data is synced in batch through the data migration framework, you can mimic it by uploading CSV data sets through the data migration framework, or if there is immediate or per record handling, you might need to look at building a simulation for that integration in your middleware or in a tool such as Postman. So now looking at expansion in opportunities, it can either be scope or business related. And what the expansion, using performance for expansion, allows you to do is to really imagine the future and see what the impact of that will be on your solution today. So if we look at scope-related changes, once you have tested your processes for a few cycles and you've been able to make some enhancements to the performance of your solution, it's a great time to think about extending the scope. You can add some additional time of day scenarios, some parallel processing, or even consider adding some batch jobs into your testing scenarios. What is important here is to just think about the effort of this change in scope and whether there is a cost-benefit analysis to including that in your overall testing. The other scenario is business-related. And this could be growth in sales, the acquisition of a new business, or even onboarding new legal entities as part of a global rollout. Some of the expansion scenarios that we tested for our client was increasing the volume of transactions for a 20% growth each year, adding high-impact periodic jobs to our testing, and even extending our testing scope first to 4 legal entities, then to 6, and finally to include 8 different legal entities. Performance testing and reporting is a great way to inform the business what the impact of change will be on the status quo. It can provide peace of mind when the business is planning for big changes, but it also future-proofs your solution. Because if there is processes impacted by any of these changes, you have the opportunity to investigate and even involve Microsoft should it be necessary. So the last consideration is architecture, and this might be a bit more of the technical part of our presentation. So when making architecture decisions, and I know for a lot of us this might be a little bit uncomfortable to admit, but these decisions are sometimes based on an individual's experience and not necessarily the best solution out there. Other decisions are made in isolation from the bigger IT picture with only some of the information available. And once you're confronted with the reality in the live solution, some of these design decisions are brought into question. Your IT architecture includes hardware like your physical devices and point of sale, and you should consider how you can test these integrations as part of performance testing. Software also encompasses many parts of your business nowadays, and many of the performance-related tests will be around these parts of your solution. The setup within your D365 solution can be optimized based on your requirements. An example here is batch jobs that can be configured to use a lot of processing power and execute super fast, but it will impact your overall user experience. Or you can execute them a little bit slower and it will have less of an impact. You can also prioritize batch jobs based on their business criticality, and all these different scenarios can be tested in performance testing, and you can decide what works best for your business. Your integration design also impacts how your solution behaves. So if we go back to our example of an e-commerce company preparing for Black Friday, they would have a web-based storefront where users can add items to their carts and place orders. And then all of this needs to be synchronized to their Microsoft Dynamics finance and supply chain system so that those orders can be picked and shipped. How these orders are synced through the integration can impact the performance of the solution. And so you might want to test different integration frequencies or even batching and use performance testing to validate these different scenarios and choose the best one. I'd also want to just share some examples from our project of how integrations had, how we made changes to integrations had a positive impact on the overall solution and user experience. So what we found is that multiple updates were being made to the same record, which meant that the number of writes between CE and F&O was quite excessive. And this didn't have an impact every day, but when we hit these peak periods, it really slowed down the system significantly because there was throttling and API limits were being reached. So we really analyzed the design and we were truly critical about what was necessary. And ultimately, we could reduce the number of writes. And that not only improved the performance of the solution, but also the cost. Another example is actually part of the standard design of how dual write works, and that's the integration methodology for between CE and finance and operations. And those updates happen real time. So during the peak trading periods, it had a significant impact on overall performance when this information was being synced in real time. The solution that Microsoft Fast Track identified is that they could delay the dual write integration for certain updates to run in batch. And that meant that changes in stock and sales order statuses were only synced when they were required in the different systems, and that improved the overall performance. The last thing that you want to consider here is your ISV solutions and custom code. These solutions bring tremendous value to your business by extending the capabilities of Microsoft Dynamics. But again, design decisions could be based on previous experience, and you might have some nuanced scenarios that would challenge the performance of these solutions. You need to plan to work with your ISV providers, your implementation partner, as well as Microsoft to identify bottlenecks and plan enhancements of the different solutions. Another thing to consider is how your users connect to the solution through different network connections, and because that could also impact their experience. You need to ensure that your performance test plan takes that into account. If we look at cloud services and software as a service, Microsoft does manage your overall architecture for your production environment, but volume testing helps gauge your storage needs and as well as planning for future growth. And being able to provide that analytics to Microsoft helps them to right-size your infrastructure. You can also use performance testing prior to platform updates because it offers a safety net when product updates are being pushed through to the system, especially where you have a very highly customized environment. During our testing, we tested 7 platform updates and 13 quality updates to ensure that the impact on the production system would be minimal. And I think the last thing just to consider is your system security on your company's firewall that has been set up. Where certain processes and integrations would be impacted by this, you need to try and plan and account for how this would run in performance testing and how that might impact your overall measurements. So the last thing that I want to share from my side is just some of the enhancements that we made throughout our overall project that was able to speed up our delivery and also provide value to our client quicker during the overall project. We introduced reporting using Azure App Insights. When we originally started the project, all of our reporting came directly out of the automation tool and through Power BI. But as time progressed, we actually created some custom metrics in App Insights, and it meant that we could compare KPIs in production directly to what we were seeing in our performance test environment. We used our automation tool not just for test automation, but also for the preparation of steps within the tool, which meant that the team could continue with other activities while these automated preparation activities were ran in the tool. We also created detailed run books for the manual activities, and that ensured that every piece of configuration or data and smoke testing that needed to be done before we started running performance tests were actually completed. By introducing all of these optimizations, we were able to reduce our time to testing from 2 months in the beginning of the project to now only a few weeks. And we are continually looking for opportunities to improve further. So I just want to here stop and say that I hope you feel inspired by all of these opportunities where performance testing can be introduced and that you can see the value that it could bring to a business. I now want to hand over to Lethabo, who is just going to talk about some of the overall experiences on the project that we had and some of the value that we were able to introduce there.
Awesome. Thank you, Liese. I would want us to take a look at this picture for a second. This clearly just visualizes the disruptions that a simple deadlock on a traffic and on the road can impose in our life. I'm looking at this picture and I'm seeing emergencies, I'm seeing school buses, I'm seeing police. There's just a lot of congestion, someone can say. I'm imagining someone who's waiting on emergency services at home, or someone who's been waiting for a delivery of vegetables for just a nice breakfast. But none of that can actually be possible or be achieved. Deadlock traffic is something similar to what we call database deadlock. And all this congestion is just led by deadlock and just a traffic jam. Now, let's get into how we avoid such by just doing a performance testing. During performance testing, we have identified high SQL utilization during the runs, and it was just unclear as to what has caused this impact. And upon investigation, it was further identified that this was related to two tables, one called invent sum, the other one called warehouse invent reverse. So these two tables were updating multiple records, which caused update conflicts and resulted into deadlocks. So during performance testing, we really have to stress about the real world conditions. So this just becomes a moment of excitement when we uncover such system issues. The deadlocks were caused as a result of processes we were testing, which just made all these updates to the tables at regular intervals. And the solution was just to configure daily periodical jobs to clean up this data, which can be cleaned up using two standard cleanup routines. And they just had to run at specific sequences. Liese, Marié, when she speaks about the architecture of your system, emphasizes on batch jobs. So this is where it can be just crucial detail and a practical detail that we're bringing as to what you may need to consider on batch jobs that can actually affect your system. You wouldn't be aware of such. So to ensure optimal performance and prevent any potential disruptions to event sum table, we strategically scheduled these two batch jobs to run during off-peak times or during off-peak hours. And this proactive approach just enabled us to clean a staggering 16 million records. And I can't think about 16 million records, but we were able to reduce the table size to just 350,000 entries. And when you look at it, it's just a remarkable 98% reduction. Just imagine lifting a table that is burdened with 16 million records. I'm quite sure it will be an overwhelming task. This not only enhances system efficiency, but also underscores our commitment to maintaining a streamlined and effective data management processes. By reducing the number of records, we were able to achieve quicker query execution and lower table access frequency, which just minimized the deadlocks and the update conflicts. Additionally, the decreased memory and CPU usage leads to just better overall system performance. And this is, I think, a key thing to note, because normally when we look at our system resources or our business resources, and sometimes it may seem like our resources are not enough. Well, actually, if we're to conduct a performance testing, we can be able to get to the root cause and actually get to see where our resources are not optimized and efficient enough. Therefore, getting to the root cause allow you to actually deal with the real matter and not just assumptions. And maybe a cherry on top to that is just the significant improved user experience that makes everything run smoother and faster. Over the course of our project, we've identified 36 improvements performances. But hold on that juice. I want you to look at this graph that is displayed on the screen. I just want you to look at what we call performance tickets that were logged during, the year that we have identified on the graph. You can see when it starts, the number of tickets that were being logged by users were just high. And in the year where performance testing was introduced and the improvement opportunities were then implemented, we have seen quite a huge improvement on the number of performance tickets that were logged. That is just a visual representation of, the overall user experience and improvement. So going back to this juice that I'm going to talk about. So as I've said, over the course of the project, we've identified 36 improvement opportunities, most of which are now implemented. And we've as well tested over 200 performance improvement from Microsoft as well as independent software vendors. This includes process changes, code enhancements, as well as configuration adjustments. Microsoft played a pivotal role in driving this and some of the technical and code enhancements. And I believe this is the close collaboration that drives our success and that we always strive for in our way of work. We were able to as well inform 2 go lives, and as well as our sales order creation is just almost 3 times faster than what it was in the start of 2023. The integration to external load planning system was reduced from 7 minutes to only a few seconds. Just imagine that. 7 minutes to a whooping few seconds. Oh, I can't imagine someone who had to have a coffee in that 7 minutes where the load planning workbench was running to just a seamless process and a seamless transition and transaction. That's what we seek for when we do performance testing. Load creation was also then, improved to be 2 times faster, and it only takes 1/5 of the time it took a year ago. I think for someone who is keen on numbers and just seeing value on numbers, this is just something worth thinking about, contemplating on for a second. Performance testing plays a crucial role in just optimizing your system efficiency and stability by identifying bottlenecks that are unique to your company and industry. This just enables early detection of any potential issues before they impact your production environment. This approach just helps to prevent any downtime, master data issues, and it just ensures the right sizing of your system while you're optimizing your integrations. Now, to just tie the knot quite nicely, the reality of business is that there will always be disruptions, but some disruptions are costly than others. It will be a costly act to stop the bleeding of technology glitches that definitely impact your ability to trade. Part of the risk management of your business or your client may just be knowing that the business could be at the stake given a system performance glitch. Something to think about. Performance testing is really about safeguarding revenue, empowering users, and ensuring seamless transitions. As we gather here today, let's embrace performance testing as our way and shield against potential losses and our catalyst for success. It's been a pleasure presenting at DynamicsCon Virtual. Let's get to take a look at some of the questions you had in the chat. Thank
you. Awesome. Okay, thank you so much. So we had quite a few questions in the chat. Some of them we've responded to. Please keep them coming. I think one of the questions that came up twice is what tools to consider for performance testing. So like we said in our presentation, we used executive automats, and some of the considerations when we selected a tool was, can we test across CE and F&O, which this tool does give you that ability, as well as to simulate real users on the system, not just generating load. So the tool actually can simulate the actual steps that users take in the system, and it was very important for us to be able to validate the exact experience that users were having in certain scenarios on the system and measure how long specific steps were taking. So this tool really does give you the ability to see what that user experience is in certain steps. But there are also other tools available. I know JMeter is one of the tools that are touted by Microsoft, and I also know that that Azure load testing is also available to do load testing on finance and operations. So I think it really depends on what you are trying to what the goals are of your performance testing, which tool would be the best. Perfect. Are there any other questions? Please keep them coming. I think one of the other things that I might just share is maybe there are some questions around what performance testing might need to look like for your specific project. And performance testing can fall into different categories depending on both your budget and the risk factors involved in your go live. So there is what we call a small budget scenario where you might want to do lower volume performance testing in a lower tier environment. And there you might just want to see more for continuous performance testing, how the performance of your solution compares to before a specific platform update or code release. You might want to do it every single time that you have new code that is being released to your solution. And there you might only consider a very small number of scenarios, very small number of actual transactions that you are looking at, and you will only be comparing the results within that specific environment from a before and after point of view. Another scenario is where you've got specific performance pain points that you are trying to solve. And in that case, you might build very specific test cases or test scenarios that can simulate those processes where you do have pain points and where you might want to look at them in isolation in order to evaluate the code that is running during that time to see if there's efficiencies that can be reached. And there you might want to consider a higher tier environment then for this low volume testing. And the last scenario is what we had for this client, where they knew that it was a very customized environment. There were multiple ISVs that were deployed and integrations, and they knew that during specific times of the day, they put the environment under tremendous pressure. In that case, we did actually invest in a high tier environment, like a tier 5, and we actually had multiple parallel scenarios running at the same time, all generating volume in the solution. So it depends on the risk factors for your project, which of these scenarios might be best suited for your client and for your project. Perfect. I just want to see what else we could potentially share. Maybe just another question is, can you do performance testing manually, or does it have to be automated? Again, here it really depends on the types of volumes that you need to reach. And I do think manual testing can be quite expensive. It's a lot of resources that you need to make available, real humans, in order to do it. So, and it also depends on how many times you might want to iterate through performance testing. So automating your performance testing scenarios really gives you that opportunity to run multiple scenarios over and over to validate the performance. And if you've got interventions that you're putting in place, looking at those before and after capabilities of your solution. So I would definitely say automation is the way to go if you want to run this a few times. However, doing it in a manual way is an option. I think there's just a lot of planning and getting everyone to do these transactions at the same time. That might be quite a lengthy preparation that you might need to do. Okay. What is the peak load you simulated? How many end users? Okay, so what the Executive Automates tool also allowed us to do is to simulate specific number of users, but running multiple different instances of D365 at the same time. So we actually used 100 test users, but we were simulating over 700 consecutive transactions being posted in the system either on CE or F&O. So I think we had about 300 consecutive sessions being executed at different time intervals based on how typical users in that system would do it. So it's not everything kicking off at the exact same time, but rather simulating that real world scenario. So there was about 300 users in CE, and a similar amount, I think it was about 400 users doing different, executing on different processes on finance and operations. And all of this was almost like staggered on top of each other for this type of parallel transactions that would happen in the real world as well. Okay, so which is better between Azure load testing or JMeter? I really think it depends on the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. I think it's important looking at each one of these tools and what the outcomes are that they can give, and then decide which one of the tools are best suited for the goals that you have for your performance testing. How and when do you recommend performance testing when doing configuration changes? For example, when creating a new illegal entity. So this is a very, very good question. We actually did have a lot of configuration changes happening in the environment while we had initially started performance testing, because this client went through multiple iterations of performance testing as well as taking new legal entities live. So what we did is we had a team that made sure that the configuration in our environment remained as close to what is in production as possible by using Azure DevOps to track this setup. And then what we had done is the performance testing was actually used to inform go-live decisions. So we were actually configuring our environment before a lot of that configuration was completed in production, to test, for example, what a go-live might look like for new legal entities. Let me see what else is there. Okay, so I think that is, I don't know if this is the end of our Q&A component of this session, but I do see that there is an opportunity to move this conversation to the roundtables in the breakout room. So I think we can continue the discussion there further.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for everyone that joined our session. We really appreciate your time and all of the amazing questions that we've received.